Well, welcome everyone to our Ask the Expert series. It's interesting because COVID-19 pandemic caused us, for my goal, to switch around a little bit on what we do. So for 11 years into the 12th year this year, we've done monthly support group activities. And with each month, we will have a speaker, and we also use it as an opportunity to connect with families. But with COVID-19, we've now found ourselves doing virtual work. And interestingly enough, it's also been a great opportunity for us to be creative and flexible. And so I am so excited to introduce one of my absolutely favorite attorneys. She's an amazing, this morning when I was putting on her, describing why I was excited, I woke up out of bed and I'm like, ooh, I'm excited. I'm like, why am I excited today? Oh shoot, today is Ask the Expert Day. And then I thought about who was gonna be part of that conversation. I was like, you know what, this is one of those most brilliant people I've met. And I'm very particular about my choice of words about people. If you're not brilliant, I'm not gonna give you that title. But this person is indeed brilliant, and beyond brilliant, she's also very compassionate in this work. So we're really blessed. She's been here a couple of times with us in terms of speaking to our families. And, she's, none other than Hillary Freeman, who is deeply, I'm just going to quickly read her bio, who is deeply committed to her work in representing people with special needs and their families. As a sister of a man with autism and a national speaker in special education matters, she's able to combine her personal experience with her legal training to help families advocate for services and support. I can honestly say personally, she's been very instrumental. And I know in the last 2 years, especially, where I've been walking the journey I've been walking. When I look back, I have what I call milestones in my life. There are going to be some key people who I'm going to truly say were instrumental in helping me navigate through this journey. And I would say, Hillary, you are one of them, just because even traveling with her to Africa, spending time with her as we went to Liberia and did talks in Ghana, just sharing her own personal experience really helped me in a very challenging time of Nicholas's journey. And it really helped me to kind of understand that, okay, day by day, moment by moment, we're going to have to make some really difficult decisions. And yet, when you talk to other people who have walked the journey, it really helps you to be able to get through it. And for me personally, I'm indebted to you. And especially in the last few weeks, you have been walking that journey with us. And so I'm so grateful that you make time. And, I reached out to her, and there's some people who don't say no. She's one of them. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you do for the families, all the innumerable families out there that you represent, because I know that it is out of passion and also out of love for this work that you do what you do. So I just want to just thank you for making time this afternoon to speak with our families. I heard bio goes on and on. You can check her out on freemanlawoffices.com. I will plug her for her because I am saying she's good. She's good at what she does. So if you want somebody on your corner, Hillary Freeman is the woman. And on this note, I just want to invite Hillary to talk to us about paving our way through the adult services. So Hillary, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Of course. Thank you, Genevieve, for having me. So I want to apologize in advance. Got stuck in traffic, so I'm doing this from the car, but I'm happy to do it. And please feel free to ask any questions that you want. I'm available. You can just ask throughout the presentation because that's what I'm here for. So today we're going to be talking about paving the way into adult services. My name is Hillary Freeman from Freeman Law Offices. We have offices throughout New Jersey, and not that it really matters anymore because everything is over Zoom, but we do have 3 offices in New Jersey, Princeton, Freehold, and Summit, New Jersey. And we do advocate for individuals with special needs across their lifespan. So that includes special education and related services, guardianships, SSI, Medicaid, and adult services, and and estate planning, so wills and special needs trusts and things like that. I got into this field because I have a brother with autism. He's 48 years old, and I've been doing this for 15 years. Love every minute of it. Love working with Genevieve. It's just been a pleasure since we met several years ago, and I just want to thank you for having me. So today is, so again, please feel free to this is going to be a lot of information for you. So feel free to stop me, ask me any questions that you want. It's potentially a confusing topic, but I'll do my best to try to explain it to you as slowly as I can. So the first thing is, when you're preparing for transition services, you're talking about paving the way into adult services. You want to, when your children are younger, they're in high school, you want to try to evaluate them to determine what their skills are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, what their interests and preferences are. And you can start that process in high school anywhere after usually it happens anywhere after the age of 14. It really, transition services really kick in at 16 and they can go until 21. And what we're talking about here are, in terms of transition services, are basically internships or placement in job settings to where in whatever they're interested in. You can do a preference assessment to identify what they would be interested in. I have clients who are working in as assistants to sports athletic directors. I have clients who are working at Best Buy, doing internships there because they're interested in computers. I have other clients who are working at GameStop. I have other clients who who rotate between ShopRite and Marshalls, doing in various capacities, even at Wegmans. It really just depends on what their interests and preferences are. And I do have clients who are working in my office. They're not clients, but I have other participants who are working in my office to get a feel for a law office and different jobs criteria and different responsibilities that you would have in an office. The best part about transition services are anything goes, and that includes now when your kids are in high school and in adult services. The system has changed so much over the years that it used to be where you would place your child in a program according to what you believe would be the best thing for them, to really trying to take into account what their interests and preferences are. And one of the reasons that it did change is because we have better tools to identify what their interests and preferences are, regardless of whether they're verbal or nonverbal. It really doesn't matter. We're able to tell based on the tools that we have what their interests and preferences are. So that's incredibly helpful. And the reason that I'm talking to you about that, especially in high school, as early as high school, is because you can help once they identify, if you start early enough, you can identify what their interests and preferences are through various job sites and job settings, and then you can plan to develop a program when they graduate from high school. It's usually at June following their 21st birthday. And so then you can work on getting a similar type of job or program for them when they graduate through DDD services. DDD is the Division of Developmental Disabilities, and that's the state agency that provides adults with disabilities. They provide services to adults with developmental disabilities, and that includes anywhere from day services, a job, assistance in a job site, maybe placement in a job site, to residential services, and that includes behavioral support to the extent that it's necessary. There are many different. They provide tons of different services, but the key is to really you can be creative. When my brother was growing up and he just graduated from high school, there were very few options. You picked a placement, they went into the placement and did anything within the confines of that placement. Now you can mix and match depending on what your child's abilities are and what their interests and preferences are. So some people are working in law firms, other people are working in various stores. There are so many different options. And then sometimes they're working at, I have one client who works at a law firm 3 days a week and Best Buy 2 days a week, and then goes to the gym on the other day. My point is you can really mix and match. But to be eligible for those services, I want to take a step back and say, all right, well, you're you've already by this point evaluated your child for transition for interests and preferences through their high school. If they're graduating, you want to make sure at 18 that they're eligible for SSI and Medicaid. SSI is supplemental security income. That goes to you for their benefit for food, shelter, and clothing, and it ranges anywhere between this. I'm going to say $500 and $800 a month, and it's really intended for food, shelter, and clothing. If your child is eligible for SSI, they will automatically be eligible for Medicaid. Medicaid is health insurance. It's minimal, but it is health insurance. It's also the primary funding source for adult services. So if you want if you're going to be in need of adult services, either through day programming or residential programming, your child will need to be eligible for Medicaid. The question is, how do they become eligible? In order to be eligible for SSI, they need to meet the Social Security definition of having a disability, and if they're on the autism spectrum, they certainly will. If they have Down syndrome, they certainly will. If they have dyslexia, they probably won't. So, but if they have a developmental disability, then they will likely be eligible for Medicaid. That's prong one. The second prong is SSI and Medicaid, excuse me. The second prong is that they have to meet the financial criteria in order to be eligible. So in order to be eligible for SSI, they need to make less than $910 a month in monthly income, and have less than $2,000 in resources in their name. Very important to pay attention to that. So if they are the beneficiary of, if they have money in their name, you want to likely move it out. If they don't have any, you might have wondered, well, you've applied earlier before 18 and they weren't deemed eligible. At 18, they only look to the individual's resources. They don't look to the parents' resources. So they're only looked to the individual's resources. So if they don't have any money, you don't have nothing to worry about, except if they are named as a beneficiary of maybe your life insurance, 401k, 403b, and they're going to inherit money, then you should be concerned, because you want to make sure that they don't inherit the money, because it will make them ineligible for DDD services. So in that regard, instead of leaving them money through your will, instead you would direct any money that would normally go to your child with special needs who's now an adult. Instead, it would go into what's called a special needs trust for their benefit, and that is a vehicle to hold the money that would otherwise be given to them directly, and then it would be used for their benefit. And if it's set up right, when your child who with autism or another developmental disability passes away, it would go to anyone who you want to leave it to, if it's set up the proper way. So basically, the will directs money to go into the special needs trust. You can name the special needs trust as the beneficiary of life insurance policies, 401ks, 403bs. You have to be careful on the 401k piece, but that's too much detail to go into today. But that's just, these are things to pay attention to ensure your child continues to be eligible for SSI and Medicaid. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I had a question about the special needs trust.
Yep.
So can you describe what that is? And I'm not sure everybody here knows what that is, because even in as much I created one, I was still confused. I thought you had to fund it or not fund it, or so what does that look like?
Yeah. So the special needs trust is just basically a bank account. It has its own tax ID number, and we write a document. It's called a trust agreement. We write a document saying the money that's going to go into this bank account will be used for the X, Y, and Z purposes, and the purposes are to supplement what the government provides. Okay, so that's the trust. Any will, or even your life insurance, saying it will go into this trust, which is basically, you can consider it a cup or a bank account, and the bank, and it's set up to follow the directions that are outlined in the trust agreement that we write for you. And that's to supplement what the government provides. So You can fund it before you die. I just don't recommend that you do that. And the reason for that is you have to file tax returns as soon as it's funded. And you don't always have to pay taxes on it, but you do have to file tax returns on it. And that's just simply annoying. The second reason is once it's in the trust, you have to use it for your child's benefit. So if you need money for whatever reason, you can't take it out for your benefit. So that's why I encourage you to fund it at the last possible second. Um, you can fund it before you die, but generally speaking, we write it and we leave it empty. And then when you pass away, your will direct funds to go into the special needs trust. Does that make sense?
It does. So I was going to do a follow up to that. So for the person whose child is, say, 10 years old right now,
Mm-hmm.
what will be that, because they're not thinking about 18 SSI and all that stuff. But I think this point about the special need trust is important because this whole goes to the point of if you're to die tomorrow, God forbid,
Right.
the importance of this piece of document. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you I would set up the special needs trust as soon as you can. If for the reason, Genevieve, that you just mentioned, if you pass away tomorrow and you leave money directly to your child, then there's going to be a 5-year look back period for SSI and Medicaid purposes. And so they're going to look back and say, is there any money that your child, now you can't just leave money to your child and then maybe move it out of their name. I mean, there are ways of doing it, but it gets riskier as they get closer to the age of 18. If you move money out of their name within between 13 and 18, Medicaid will say they really had money in their name and you're moving it out, so there are problems associated with that. They might delay eligibility for Medicaid or assess some sort of penalty. The other risk of doing that is, if depending on how much money it is, you might need to move it out of their name to qualify for Medicaid. And then to make it to be a little bit more confusing about it, if you move it out, you probably have to move it out into either an ABLE account or a first party special needs trust. An ABLE account is a tax-free savings account that you can use and you can invest up to $15,000 tax-free a year or up to $100,000 tax-free total. But if there's any money left in there when your child passes away, it goes to the government. It's the same thing for a first party trust. So you set up these accounts when you're moving money out of your child's name into an account so they can qualify for government benefits, as compared to the third party special needs trust, where it was never your child's name it was never in your child's name to begin with. You just want to leave them money, so it's your money that's going into a trust versus their money that's going into a trust. If it's their money going into a trust, if any you can do that, and then it will, and so it is every can you okay, it will do that. And so if it's their money being moved into a trust, you can use it for their benefit, but then when they pass away, it goes to the government. If it's your money going into a trust, it can go to whoever you want when you pass away, when your child passes away. So in my case, I'm just going by personal experiences as an example, because I'm not telling you to do anything we haven't done in our own family. My parents left money to a third party special needs trust, where they appointed my sister and I as the trustees of the special needs trust. And the money that's in that trust is there for my brother. So we can use it for his benefit to, when they pass away, we can use it as much as whatever we need to pay for him. We can take money from that special needs trust and use it to supplement what the government provides. For example, if he has a cavity and he needs a filling, you can let Medicaid pay a certain amount for a silver filling, but maybe for aesthetic purposes you want him to have a white filling. We let Medicaid pay the amount for the silver filling, and then we take the money from the trust to pay for the difference between the silver and the white filling. So that's the difference. But going back to Genevieve's question, a really long answer to that question is, the longer that you wait, the riskier it is that that the money will not be available to your child with special needs, or they might not be eligible for benefits. So since you don't know when you're going to die, I would just do it as soon as you can, and then you have nothing to worry about later on.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was a long
Mhm.
answer, but it was very important because many people think, especially when they hear trust, they just think rich people. But
Mhm.
many of us work, and at a bare minimum, your job actually has insurance on you at least one time your salary. So
Right.
that money from a life insurance from work, even if you don't have your own external, that becomes one of the things you want to make sure that does not disqualify your child. Because I know many a time that was my mindset until I became more educated, understanding that right now what I can do for my child, the best thing I can do is create a will and also have that special needs trust created so that we don't know the future. So the number of the parents on here have younger kids, but
Mhm.
some of you, your children are going into teenage years. So I just wanted to make sure that she highlighted this point and you got it.
Okay. Are there any other questions related to that?
We did get a question in the chat that I was going to read to you.
Okay.
My parents want to put their house into a special needs trust for my child. They're currently on Medicaid now. Will doing
Mhm.
this make them ineligible for their Medicaid or take them off Medicaid and must wait 5 years to get back on? If so, what is recommended for them to do?
If are you talking about for them or a child with special needs?
Hi. I didn't realize
Hi.
I could speak. Hi, thank you for doing this. We really appreciate it. No, my parents are on the Medicaid.
Mhm.
So they want to, with everything going on, I'm sure everybody's in the same boat. They're thinking about my daughter's future. They have a home. They don't have any other debt, but they are on Medicaid. I'm so
Mhm.
worried because I'm thinking about, I reached out to you a couple weeks back about a special needs trust. I know the importance of it.
Mhm.
I'm so worried I do something and they lose all their Medicaid. That's my biggest fear.
Yeah, no, if the house, I mean, I have a lot more questions that I don't, that I wouldn't want to ask you about right now. But generally speaking, you can move the house into a special needs trust without jeopardizing government benefits.
Oh,
Uh,
okay,
There
great.
are
Thank
risks
you.
associated with that. If there's an accident on the property, then the trust gets sued. But there's not. But usually you have homeowners insurance for that. So,
Okay.
there usually is not an issue.
But their house would not be theirs anymore. I'm assuming it would be.
Correct.
That's.
It would go into the trust.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there?
Yes. You hear me?
Yeah, of course. And I love this. So keep
Okay.
on coming.
Okay, I'm a grand. So I
Mhm.
wanted life insurance for him.
Mhm.
I mean, we both have medical problems. So I don't know who's going first. But do I, as I say, take out the third party special need fund? That's where I do it.
So you set up if you get life insurance, then you set up the special needs trust as the beneficiary. So is your husband still alive? You're,
Unmarried.
what?
No, I'm not married. Never
Are you
married.
setting up the special needs trust for your grandchild?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
want to do
yes,
that.
you would set up the special needs trust and it would just be named as the beneficiary on your policy. So first you have to set up the trust. You'll get a tax ID number. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm sorry, I thought you said you didn't know. I misinterpreted your question initially.
Mm-hmm.
So you would you would have life insurance policy and you set up the special needs trust as the beneficiary of that policy.
Okay,
So
because
instead of
I have a niece who I want, like she would be in charge of it to help him in case
Yep.
anyone only give him trouble with it. So I'd put both
Yeah.
of them name on it.
So if you want to leave it to both your niece and is it your nephew or who is
Grandson.
grandson.
Yeah.
If you want to leave money to your niece, you can do that too. You can say 50%. I'm just giving an example.
Mm-hmm.
50% of the life insurance will go to your niece and 50% can go into the special needs trust for the benefit of your grandson.
Okay, because he's going to be 14 in December. I mean, the government is not going to look back on that. Would that affect
No,
anything?
it was never his name to begin with, so you won't have any issues.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Okay.
So right now I'm not working. I don't have a life insurance or any of that stuff. If I do a a trust right now, depending on life situations and as they go, do I have to keep making, like, do I have to keep making a new one as I go along as situations change?
No, not at all. Once the trust is created, you should be good to go. And if it's especially if it's written the proper way, according to like the if in New Jersey or the state guidelines, you should not have any reason to change it, and you wouldn't fund it right now. You would fund it when you pass away. Excuse me. So you wouldn't have to change anything. At the most, you might need to update your will, but the trust will remain the same.
Okay. So then it would be written kind of like, if this person has a 401k, that will go in. If there's this money, it will go in the future.
There's a slight caveat with the 401k. The 401k, they often have mandatory distributions. So with the 401, the special needs, we would include language in there to account for the 401k because of the mandatory distributions. It can impact the government benefits. So we include language in there to account for it. So the 401k does not jeopardize the government benefits. But yes, everything else will go in there straightforward, no problems.
I have one more thing.
So one avenue to go.
Another question. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Who do I get to help me with this? You have information, or do I go on the internet?
Yeah, I'm happy to help you with it. My website is freemanlawoffices.com.
I'm on the street. I don't have a pen.
I'm sorry?
Jean, we can email it to you.
No, right, I'm walking on the street. I don't have a pen.
Yeah, Jean, we can email it
thanks.
to you.
Thank you. Thank both of you.
We'll email it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.
So we're happy to help you with it if you want.
Marlene, you were going to say one more?
Yeah, another question is with SSI. With $2,000, that includes, because I remember when I did Medicaid, they include like, what's my car worth? Is my car worth more than $2,000? And with SSI, is it the same thing? Like money inside like a bank account, plus do they look at other stuff?
If you're applying for who are you applying for?
For my daughter, she's 12.
Okay, so you wouldn't apply. I don't know your financial situation, but what I'm referring to now is assuming that your child turns 8. You're applying at 18. So you set up the special needs trust now, but you don't apply for SSI and Medicaid until your child turns 18, unless you would otherwise be eligible.
Yeah, I would be eligible because you said it's less than $910 a month.
Right, and then less than $2,000 in resources. So yes, they count your house, they count your car, they count all of that. But moving forward from that, if you are not eligible because of your financial resources, if you own your house, if you own your car, you can apply for your daughter when she turns 18, because assuming she doesn't have any money in her name, because they don't look to your assets anymore, they only look to hers.
Thank you.
Other questions?
There was another question on the chat, right?
Yeah, Jumana, did you have another question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Another question. If and it's back to my parents with this special needs trust.
Yep.
Would a better route, if they wanted to hold on to the ownership of their home, could they potentially put it in a will? And then after their death, it would go right into the trust if I already created the empty trust or the shell of a trust?
They could sell their home and then put the proceeds in the trust. They can put the house in the trust.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Keep going.
No, it really just depends on their individual circumstances, what
Right.
I would recommend. So that's why I have some follow-up questions to that. But
Right.
we look at what the whole goal is, right? The whole intent. If they're dividing their assets and their estate amongst many people, are they doing it just to your daughter? Are they, we look at all of those factors, and then how much is a house worth? How much do they have invested in the house? Is there a mortgage? So we look at all of that,
Yeah.
and then we make a decision as to, is it better to put the house in the trust? Is it better for your daughter to live there? And then, because if your daughter lives in the house at full time, then the house might not be considered an asset for SSI and Medicaid purposes. It
Oh.
could, but it might not. So there are ways around it to, but we would go through that analysis with you.
Right. But Medicaid is entitled to the house upon their death. Am I wrong about that?
It
So will
depends on
they
how they're receiving Medicaid. For them, I don't know the way they have their
Right.
estate set up. So it's certainly possible, but I don't know that for sure because I don't know how it's set up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course. Other questions?
No, I think this is a very hot topic that oftentimes is very confusing to people.
It's very confusing. Genevieve, I don't know if you've ever heard me say this before, but for wills and special needs trusts and SSI and Medicaid, more so with the wills and special needs trusts, if it takes you need to listen to it 3 times. So you need to hear this 3 times. The first time you're completely confused. The second time you start recognizing the keywords, and the third time it generally clicks. So if you are absolutely confused and this is your first time hearing this, you are not alone. It is a very confusing topic because there are nuances that I'm going into detail on that just you don't hear about every single day. So don't be alarmed or worried if this is confusing to you. Just listen to this presentation 2 more times and then you should be okay.
Well, that's why I wanted to make sure that the key takeaway from this part of it was, tomorrow, we're in a COVID-19 pandemic right now. Parents, listen to me. Anything can happen to any one of us at any time. Not that we want that to happen, but we want to make sure that we know we're knowledgeable enough to prepare for the future. And that's why we said this conversation is so important.
That's right.
And so knowing the terminology, being exposed to it is so important because a lot of times many of us say, oh, I'll do it later. And I know it's very overwhelming, but at least at the barest minimum, without knowing what's going to happen in the future, we need to prepare. And setting up a will, a trust of some sort is very, very important. So that would be my key takeaway from this part of the presentation.
Yep. And given time, would you rather me go into, I can probably do both, but would you rather me focus more on guardianships or the adult services?
Well, you can talk about whichever one. I think most of the folks, some people on here may not be familiar with guardianship. So maybe the importance of that, because that's the other thing at 18 people need to think about. So you talked about importance of doing SSI and Medicaid and then understanding that because it took me a while to also even understand why I need Medicaid because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm working, I have health insurance. Why should I think about Medicaid? And so if you can redefine that and why that's important.
Of course. So Medicaid, their health insurance is, you're not doing it for their health insurance. It's Medicaid health insurance is, I consider it to be emergency insurance because if your child is in the hospital and they're on Medicaid, the hospital has to accept Medicaid. They cannot bill you for anything beyond what Medicaid covers. And I'll give you an example. My brother has been in the hospital many times throughout his life. And one particular time, the hospital did try to bill us for the balance of what Medicaid covered. And fortunately, I knew that they could not do that. They had to accept what Medicaid covered. So there's a benefit to that in that it's you don't have to worry about the balance due. But more importantly, Medicaid funds adult services. So if your child is going to be in need of any type of adult service through DDD, when they age out of high school, they need to qualify for Medicaid. So that's why it's incredibly important that you make sure you take the steps now so they're set up to be eligible for Medicaid when you apply when your child turns 18. You can apply if you haven't already, and if you haven't already applied and your child is past the age of 18. It's not too late. You can apply anytime after your child turns 18. If you're financially eligible, you can apply earlier than that. But at 18, if you're not eligible, your child might be. if they're set up the right way. So, and they need to be set up again for Medicaid so they can get adult services. Otherwise, they won't be eligible for the adult services. So that's why it's really, really important that you do that.
Can you give examples of when you say adult services? Because I think most people just start to think when you use the example of day program, but it's beyond just that, right? So maybe.
Yeah, so it's job placement. You can get so many things as an adult, through the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So, but it really, so I want to back up a little bit because I'm going to give you examples, but I want to explain how you get there. You have to fill out an application through DDD to the Division of Developmental Disabilities to establish that your child would be eligible for services. And it really is dependent on the level of need. So they have to have a developmental disability that's accrued before the age of 22. And that disability has to impact them in 3 out of 5 major life areas. So you really have to establish that they really, this is not the time to be a proud parent. Unfortunately, you really want to emphasize the areas of your child's disability. So if they can, they can make a purchase on their own, and if they can make a purchase but they can't get the change, or they don't know how much is owed, or they don't know how much is owed, and they don't know how much change they should receive, that would be one example of, yes, they know that they have to make a purchase, but they don't understand the value of money. Maybe they can stay by themselves in a home, but you need to prompt them through everything to make sure that they're safe. If they can use a stove, if they can't use a stove, you want to talk about that. But the DDD has an application that asks you a ton of questions to establish that your child has a disability and is in need of services. Once you fill out that application, and I'm giving you a very brief overview on the application. Once you fill out that application, then you will also have to fill out another application called the NJ-CAT. And the NJ-CAT, is based on how you answer those questions, governs. Your child is assigned a tier, and that tier then moves in, is based on what tier they're in. They get a budget, and based on the budget, you can then get access services to for your child, so as an adult. And then when I'm talking about services, I'm talking about what I mentioned before, maybe going to the gym, maybe having a job coach with them as they work in a law firm, maybe having a job coach with them if they're working anywhere, working in Best Buy, based on what they want and what they don't want. Maybe a residential services. So my brother's been in a group home. He's likely going to be moving into an apartment once it's finally built, in the next few months. But he's been in a group home since he was 21. A group home this house particularly has, I believe it's 4 guys and 3 staff members are fully supervising them at all times. But his needs are changing, so he's going to be moving into an apartment where he has one-on-one staff, and his budget accounts for that because he needs those. We've established a level of need where he needs one-on-one support at all times. Even though my brother's in a group home, we can still see him. We can take him out as much as we want. We can go on vacations with him. We talk to him all the time, to the extent that he can talk. He repeats Sesame Street skits. But these are services, these are supports that are available because we're not able to take care of him 24/7, and he's not in high school anymore. He works. His one-on-one does various jobs with him in the day program. But he also used to work in a movie theater, and he would go around and help clean the movie theater. I have other clients, like I mentioned before, working in law firms, and some are copying and scanning. Others are doing computer related work, designing brochures, making phone calls. It's just basically the adult services are any types of support your child who's now an adult, they will need to be as independent and successful as possible as an adult. So it can go anywhere from day services to residential services, support in the job, maybe transportation at times. vacation to a point. That's the new thing. It really varies across the gamut, and it just depends on what your child is interested in doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any questions about that? So people understand that what you get in school right now. So think about services that you get in school, right? And the people that help your child to provide that service, those people are paid by the school district and so on and so forth. In adult world, Medicaid dollars will pay for those people, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Which is why.
It's a really great explanation.
Well, I had to learn it because I was like, oh, so that's why I need to make sure I, take the steps to be eligible for Medicaid in the first place.
Yep.
Which means I have to make sure I'm eligible for SSI in the first place.
Yep.
So
Well,
going back.
Your child can be eligible for Medicaid even though even if they're not eligible for SSI. But if they're eligible for SSI, they're automatically eligible for
Okay,
Medicaid.
got it.
Yep.
Still learning.
Yep. It's confusing. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because a lot of parents might be eligible for SSD or Medicare, and then because your child is a dependent on you, they might by default also be eligible for Medicare. So they can qualify for sometimes SSI, Medicaid, and Medicare. Others are just eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. And there are waivers. I mean, I'm going to confuse you to no end right now when I say that if your child has more money than the $2,000 in resources that I discussed, if they have a job in New Jersey, they might qualify for Medicaid under what's a waiver, which is called New Jersey workability. So there are many ways of qualifying for Medicaid. The rules that I explained are general rules, those are the baseline rules, but there are essentially the Medicaid waivers are essentially exceptions to those rules, where there might be another way of qualifying for Medicaid, so staff get paid, and there's a budget to provide those supports for your child. Did I confuse you even more? Because I really tried.
I know. I still haven't figured out that whole workability thing and then the non-DAC and DAC and all that. I'm still getting there to that point, but I think the basics.
Yeah, it really just depends. So when in the consultations, and I don't care. I've never been one to say you have to use me. I'm always happy to help. If you ever want, but I've never been one to say you have to use me. But the process in our office is we have the consultation. We find out what's going on around your child's life. What are the circumstances? What do they want to do? What do you want them to do? How do you envision their future? And then we try to set up I don't tell you everything that I'm telling you right now. I might gear it more specifically to help you achieve your goal. Excuse me.
Right. So the question here, two of them. One says, when do we start filling out the DDD application? My child is 12. And then the second question is, can you have savings account for your child while he's receiving SSI?
You can. So the savings account that you would have should really be to only hold the SSI payments. And then you can use that money. So if your child is getting SSI if they're 18, for food, shelter, and clothing, you can charge rent. So the money would go into the savings account and would go out to you, assuming they're living home with you. It would go out to you as in exchange for as a form of rent payment. And you should just keep the money down below 2,000. So they can qualify so that you can have a savings account to hold the SSI, but then it should go out and so it stays below 2,000, so they continue to be eligible for those benefits. And the second question on when you should apply, if your child is 18, if your child is 12, you can wait. You would apply for DDD, fill out the DDD application anywhere after the time of 18, but make sure they're eligible for SSI and Medicaid first. Did that answer your question?
Yep, I think it did.
Am I talking really, really fast? It feels like
no, you're perfect.
Okay.
All right, so you want to go into the guardianship stuff a little bit?
Yeah. Any questions about anything that I've talked about up until now? And I can easily go into guardianships. If not, I just want to make sure I've answered all of those questions.
No question is silly, people.
Okay. So Genevieve, you mentioned before different things that happen at 18. So you're going to apply for SSI and Medicaid when your child turns 18. Ideally, you'd want to do your will and your special needs trust now if you haven't done it already. And I don't care what age your child is, you should do it now. But also, and also at 18 you're really looking in transition planning through the IEP process, and that's through the school district. But guardianship is another essential thing that you probably want to do at 18. When your child is under the age of 18, they're a minor, you can make decisions for them, you can advocate on their behalf, you can also give them as much independence as you feel is appropriate. But you are you're the parent and you're probably the guardian. And so, guardian, we're under the age of 18. So when your child turns 18, though, they're legally an adult. So because of that, you lose all rights as parents. And you might say, look, it's so obvious that my child still needs support. How can I lose all rights? The law doesn't distinguish between who is independent at 18 and who is not independent. When a child turns 18, they are legally an adult, they are independent, unless you go to court to say, hey, judge, I know my child is 18, but they still need my support. So that's you're telling the judge that you need to continue to be the guardian of your child, or another family member has to be the guardian of your child, to ensure that they are safe and they are making the best decisions, or somebody is making decisions for them, and they are safe, healthy, and you're working in their best interests. It's case in point, my brother he's essentially nonverbal, and he's 48, and we are his guardians. We make decisions for him because there's no way he could make it on his own. But we had to go to court to say, judge, my brother is 18, but we did this when he was 18. He cannot cook on his own. He cannot, and he doesn't understand finances. He cannot communicate. He needs somebody to continue making decisions for him. So we applied to the court when he turned 18. With the process has changed a little bit now, but generally speaking, you file a complaint with either 2 doctor certifications or 1 doctor certification. And if your child's already eligible for DDD, you can do a DDD. You can let them know, and you only need 1 doctor. You file these documents with the court with the $200 filing fee. The court then appoints an attorney to represent your child. And that person will meet with your child and meet with you and write a report, hopefully supporting the need for a guardianship. And then you file these documents with the judge, and the judge will then, if it's not contested and everybody's on the same page, they will then appoint you as guardians, in which case you can make the same decisions that you could make. You can make the same decisions now that you could have made before your child turned 18. There are different types of guardianships. There's a limited guardianship and there's a full guardianship. The full guardianship is basically saying you can talk to doctors on their behalf, you can manage their finances, you can decide where they live to the extent that you care. You can decide what they wear to the extent that you care. You can make every decision that you would otherwise be able to make if they were under the age of 18, if you have a full guardianship. You can also do a limited guardianship, which I call a guardianship with carve-outs, basically saying, that your child can make some decisions, but you ultimately need to make decisions in other areas. So the common things that have come up with are, they can make medical decisions on their own, but you need to manage their finances, or vice versa. You need to manage their medical decisions and they can manage their finances. Or maybe you can make medical and financial decisions, but living arrangements, they can kind of live on their own. So you want to give them more independence in that regard. So you can say, I'm going to give them 3 options of where they can live, and they get to ultimately choose where, out of the 3 options that I'm giving them, where they ultimately live. So that's essentially what guardianship is. You're having them declared incapacitated because, you know, even though they're an adult, they still need some help with making decisions. And then you can continue making decisions and talking to people on their behalf. If you don't do this, you lose all rights. Some doctors will say that that you know they will still talk to you regardless, but I wouldn't count on it, because if you run into a doctor maybe in a hospital that doesn't agree, that you know, you don't want to be caught in an emergency situation where suddenly you don't have any rights. To that point, guardianships are permanent unless you have them revoked. So the judge orders it. You are permanently the guardian, but you can go back to court to have it revoked should the need arise, and your child no longer needs a guardian. There are less restrictive forms of being able to advocate for your child, but they're not. There are certainly risks associated with that. So you have full guardianship, you have limited guardianship, you also have a conservatorship, which is basically where you're not taking away your child's rights, but you are maintaining the ability to make decisions for your child. So you make it together. So that is also through the court process. But so depending on your child's abilities, you might do conservatorship, you might do guardianship. If they can communicate and they understand, you know, what you're trying to do, another option is a power of attorney, where they are authorizing you to make medical decisions or financial decisions on their behalf in the event they can't make it for themselves. That is orally revocable. That is not, you don't go through the court process. It's not necessarily permanent. If your child does not like the decisions that you're making, they can then take it away, take that right away from you, and that's enforceable. So so that's an option for you. It depends on your children, what I would recommend and what their abilities are. So but to be clear, you have a power of attorney, which is where they are authorizing you to make decisions on their behalf in the event they can't make it for themselves. That's power of attorney. You do not need to go to court for that, but it is orally revocable. So they can take that right away from you if you do something they don't like. The second one is a little bit more restrictive, is conservatorship, where you're not taking it's a legal proceeding. It's permanent unless you go to court to have it revoked, where you're not taking their rights away from them to, let's just say, manage their finances, but you are maintaining the ability to do so. And then the most restrictive is guardianship, where they do not have the right to make decisions that you are the guardian of. So if you have full guardianship, they have no rights to make decisions unless you give them the right to do so. If you have if you have limited guardianship, you might say they have maintained the right to drive, but you make medical and financial decisions for them. It's just that's a limited guardianship. And a full guardianship, like I said, you maintain all decision making rights unless you give them the ability to do so because you think that they can. So that's the guardianship process. You don't need an attorney to file for guardianship. You certainly can. You can hire an attorney. We will do it for you. But you don't. But if you feel comfortable doing it on your own, there are papers on the court website. New Jersey Courts Online, I believe, is the website. And there's a packet of information, so that directions that guide you through the process. It's really just up to you in terms of whether you want to do it yourself or you want an attorney to do it for you.
That's great. I've heard something called supported decision making.
Yep.
What is that? How is that different from what you just described?
So I'm not a fan of supportive decision making. So supportive decision making is, I just say that outright. Supportive decision making is essentially, it's not a legal process. It's basically where you as a parent try to talk your child through making decisions on their own. And I think it's appropriate in some circumstances, but if you're comparing if you're thinking about guardianship versus supportive decision making, I think I go towards guardianship, and because supportive decision making is basically where you're trying to, as a parent or an advocate, you're trying to talk to your child and convince them to guide them through to making decisions in their best interest. You have that. I am afraid of I don't recommend it. Because in most circumstances, there are some circumstances where I will, but essentially it's just risky. If your child doesn't make those right decisions, then now what? You don't have any ability to do anything to help them, and they can follow your advice, but they don't have to. And sometimes those risks of not following your advice can put them in harm's way, and you can't do anything about it unless you go to court and have guardian.
Oh, did we lose her? Hopefully not. I think she logged off. All right, she's going to be back in a minute, I'm sure. I hope this has been helpful for people.
Yes, it was.
Any questions? It is, right? Is there a particular area or some part that you're not sure about still? Like you think, okay, she said it, I don't quite get it.
Well, I didn't get to ask her a question about the fact that I'm retired and I'm getting Social Security and pension. If it affect if I put him in my life insurance policy. I mean, as a beneficiary. But I guess I'll ask her next time.
She came back. She popped back up.
I'm just making sure you're awake.
Okay, Ms. Jean, you can ask her your question.
Yeah, I was saying that I'm retired and I'm getting pension and Social Security. So will it affect the fact that I'm going to put him on as my beneficiary in my life insurance policy? Will it do anything towards it?
No, it does not. Because it won't. That's a simple answer.
Okay. And then the question is that the other question is that I have college loans like everybody else, and it will never be paid off in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. So if would they touch the policy, the benefits I leave for him to pay for the student loan?
So if you're talking about, I'm sorry, it's for your grandchild?
Yeah.
Okay, for your if your grandchild is, how old is your grandchild again?
He's 13.
Okay, when he turns 18, they don't look to your assets at all.
Okay.
So they won't touch your loans. He won't be responsible for them. They only what's in his name.
Okay, thanks.
Of course.
All right, there's a question on the platform. It says, can we create our own will online, or do you recommend creating one with an attorney?
No, not in this case. The will, I would definitely go through an attorney, because when you have a child with special needs, there are so many nuances, and that you have to consider that can impact your child's benefits and their life. So I would really, it's contingency planning that I don't think the online documents plan for. I think they're great for basic planning, but they don't plan for the contingent. They don't do contingency planning very well. So that's why I would go to an attorney to do that.
Yeah, no, that's very important. The complexity associated with our kids, and I know it's overwhelming for many of us, because we're already dealing with their healthcare needs, their educational needs, and now you have to think about this other aspect, and it can look like it's costly, but it's worth the peace of mind is so important to know that something has been done right for them for their future. So this is why I think this conversation is almost like this kind of topic needs to be repeated every year.
Yeah.
Like she said, until we get it, there's a question here says, do you need both a lawyer and a financial advisor to set up a trust account?
No.
One sets up a legal process and the other one sets up a trust account?
No, so you don't need a financial advisor to set up the trust account. You might want a financial advisor for investments to manage the investments, which the money in the special needs trust can be invested. So you can use a financial advisor for that. But in terms of setting it up, you just need a lawyer to write the trust and get a tax ID number, and then you can bring it to a bank and set it up.
Okay. The next question is, what's the average cost for establishing a will? But are you saying a special needs trust or just a will? Somebody asked that question. Maybe you can kind of speak to the special needs trust.
I can't speak. So there, I mean, it varies in my office. The third party special needs trust, we do a full estate plan together. So it includes a will, special needs trust, which is a third party special needs trust, and power of attorney and medical directives. So generally that ranges anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000, and for all of those documents together. But for other attorneys, I know other attorneys charge way more. There certainly might be attorneys that charge less, but I think that's the general range. I know there are some attorneys that charge a lot of money for it. But like 5,000-10,000. But for a third party trust and the wills, that's our fee, between 2,500 and 3,000.
And I think you said it best when you said it's not just about the will, but looking at the whole entirety of having, estate planning component piece of it. And I know that the ticket price sounds a lot to a lot of people, but once again, it's like planning it in advance. Many of us can, you can start to, save a little bit towards this, knowing that this is something that I really need to make sure is done right. And it becomes something that you just say, okay, you know what, and maybe let me throw it out there. Instead of, people are saying, what can I get your child for birthday? Help me get us a trust set up.
Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? Like, make it so that, people give him a gift the right way. Because I had to tell my parents, please don't leave anything in his name. Mm-hmm. I need you to do it this way. So if this is costly, you might now do a GoFundMe for it. Just do whatever you got to do to make this thing happen for your child.
The way I view it, and I think that was really good advice, and the way I do it, or really recommend, it's a small investment, but you're getting thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of services for the rest of their life. So by setting up the trust, if you don't set up the trust, then you're going to have to pay for the services to the extent that you need it. I think it's a small investment for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of services for the rest of their life.
Right. No, I think that's very, very important. And I know when I first heard it, I was just like, oh my God, that sounds like a lot. But over time, and, I'm there now because Nick is 19. And so we're in that space of having to now say, okay, what are we doing? How are we doing it? And these are things that we've had to kind of learn about. Thankfully, the schools that we've been in, there was a huge advocate in education around it. So at the age of 11 is when we first set up our special needs trust, but I'm actually hearing what I'm hearing. I'm going to have to revisit it. We didn't get a chance to talk a lot, no time is gone, a lot about the differences between the ABLE account versus, having a third party trust. And maybe that could be another conversation another day.
Yeah, if you want me to.
Okay.
So an ABLE account is versus a third-party special needs trust. So I'm going to put two things. I'm going to draw a line down the middle of your page. If you're taking notes, you have an ABLE account and a first-party trust on one side of the line, and you have a third-party special needs trust on the other side of the line. An ABLE account and or a first-party special needs trust, you're moving your child's money into an ABLE account or a first-party special needs trust so they can qualify for government benefits. A third-party special needs trust is where you are leaving money to a trust and your child never had control over it whatsoever. So I'm lumping ABLE account and first-party trust together on one side because there are lots of similarities. But the general theme of when you use an ABLE account or a first party trust, the general takeaway is that you would use that if you're moving your child's money out of their name to qualify for Medicaid or SSI and Medicaid benefits. An ABLE account is free to set up. You do not need an attorney to do that. But there are restrictions around it. First of all, that you can invest up to $15,000 tax-free a year. You can't do more than that. You can do $15,000 a year. It can, by the way, also hold child support. So child support can impact government benefits. So it can hold child support too. But you're moving your child's money into these accounts to qualify. An ABLE account, like I said, is free to set up. You can't fund it with more than $15,000 a year, and it is a cap of $100,000, and it's tax free. And when a first party trust, which is also lumped with the ABLE account, it's the same that you're moving money into a trust, your child's money into a trust so they can qualify for government benefits. When your child passes away, if there's any money in the ABLE account, if there's any money left in the first party trust, it goes to the government, or it can go to the government. Medicaid will establish a lien to pay back for the services that they've been providing all along, because they know you've moved money out of their name so they can qualify. So they'll say, all right, we'll allow you to do that, but we get paid back later on. Versus a third party special needs trust, which is where your child never had control over the money. You can move the money so you leave the money into a third party trust so they can qualify for benefits and have the money to supplement what the government provides. When your child passes away, then it can go to whoever you want. So in my brother's case, they moved the money. In his case specifically, if there's any money left in the trust when he passes away, it will be divided amongst my sister and myself, instead of going to the government. So those are very key differences. So if you need to set up an ABLE account or a first party trust to move your child's money out of their name, that's okay to do, but spend it down first. Because if spend it down before you start, using money from any other resource, because if there isn't any money left in those accounts when your child passes away, Medicaid doesn't get a lien on anything. They can't collect it. But if there's any money left in there, then it will go to the government. So you basically put it in the accounts, and then you would spend it down to ensure that they continue to qualify for government benefits. And the government doesn't get anything in return. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, one other question. What about 529 plans?
That's a good question. So 529 plans aren't officially considered to be a resource or an asset of your child. But I'm cautiously saying I think that could change. So I would recommend, and I always do recommend, that you change the beneficiary of a 529 plan to another family member, because you can do that without a penalty. I'm just overly conservative in that regard. Currently, as the law stands, it's not considered a resource of your child, but I'm afraid that's going to change. So I'm trying to get ahead of the game and saying I would change it out of their name now. If you want to change it back later, and the law still allows for it, you can, but I would get it out now and then plan later.
Okay, great. This has been great. Are there any questions for Hillary or anybody else? All right. Well, you've answered a lot of questions. You've given me more food for thought. Jenny has just posted a survey for us to give feedback to Hillary. I'm sure she will appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I hope it's really motivated you. Maybe some of you is kind of making you have palpitation right now, like, oh my God, I got to get this thing done. But, one day at a time. At least you have a milepost of what to do next, which is the goal of what we do with our Ask the Expert series, is to really think about what are the things that we should be doing to help our special needs loved ones. So if there are no other questions, I want to say thank you, Hillary, for making the time. You're going to be hearing from me soon, because I got to revisit my special needs trust, because I think I've been doing things in my own way and maybe need to revisit it the way it is. So on that note,
Thank you so much.
And everybody,
Thank you very much.
I hope you have a wonderful day. Call with any questions.
All right, awesome. So
okay, you too, dear.
Back to New Jersey. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.